I just know you're going to love the guests that we have on in this episode, so don't go away. Welcome to another episode of The Interview. I'm Dr. Rick Wadge, and this is really part 2 of an interview with Margy Pezdirtz with her show, brand new season starting, Serendipity. And you are studying what in this season?
Well, I started off with this, Jacob's Sons,
Okay.
because they're foundational. And then I went from there to the desert encampment, and then there from going into Israel and Kings, the Kings of Israel. And I said, well, it's the good, the bad, and the hideous. I wanted to say the good, bad, and ugly, but I didn't know if I could use that title or not. So the good, bad, and the hideous. And they had some really great kings, King David. I even did a thing on King Solomon, which I think will surprise a lot of people, how that one comes out. And I just kept going into these different kings. I mean, I could have talked for a year on the kings of Israel. And when I say Israel, I mean Israel and Judah, primarily Judah. And then I pulled off and I did 2 separate shows. One's called Stones and Scrolls, which is about the Ezekiel stones, which I definitely want to talk to you about,
Yes.
and the Isaiah scroll. And then I did one on Gush Halav, which is a Christian village in northern Israel. A friend took me there because he's a secular Jew. He took me there because he wanted people to know, the world to know. And he said, Margy, you're a writer. I want to use your expertise. And he said, I want the world to know that here in this country, in the Middle East, where Christians are being killed by the dozens, by the thousands actually, that here they openly worship Jesus. And here they are free to worship. They're even protected. And he said, I want to take you there. And I was so like, okay, all right, I'll do this. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to do it. So he picked us up. He took us to Gush Halav. And as I said, it's on the map. It's Jish, Jish. But you go around Safat. And it was really funny because Eli is just a precious man. And he's a very poor driver. In Israel, you've got to drive like an insane person. He's very cautious. And finally, my sister said, why don't you let Margy drive? She can handle this. Yeah, I can. So anyhow, but it was sweet. It was really sweet and cute. So as we go around Safat, he says, there's the hospital. And I said, are we going to need that? He said, I hope not. But anyhow, we go to Gush Halav and we park. It's everything, it's hilly, mountainous. And he
Just like Amarillo.
Yeah, of course. Yes, down there somewhere. Anyhow, and we had a host who was a Christian, and he was a landscape person, so he has this little truck that goes, and we get in this truck, and our host doesn't speak any English, so Eli is translating in this little truck, and I'm picking up some of the Hebrew, but not all of it because we're going and he's taking us through the village, and we went to, even though we say they're 85% Christian, they are, but they're Catholics, and they're
Okay.
Maronite Catholic.
What is that?
Well, there was a priest by the name of Maron, Maroun, I think, and they followed him. He became a saint, I guess, and so they're Maronite Catholics. They're very much Catholic, same as any other Catholic, but there's this kind of like same whether they're a Baptist or they're a Methodist or whatever. I don't.
How's her relationship with the Jewish people?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay.
So anyhow, he takes us first to this church. Beautiful, beautiful church, mostly limestone. And we go in and he's explaining everything, and then Eli's translating. And so we hear this bam, 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 bam going on outside. And what on earth? Well, we're there just before Good Friday. And so they're preparing, there's this drum corps outside of like high school kids, and they're going bam, 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 bam on the drums. They're snare drums, going up, and they're preparing to march up the hill. As I said, everything is hilly, and at the very top of the hill is this church, an old church, and on top of it are three crosses.
Oh.
One of them is very large, and then the two smaller crosses, and they're lighted at night. As soon as the sun goes down, the lights come on. They're neon lights, white, outlined in red. I said, why the red? And he says, because it shows better from a distance. And so what they do on Easter there is there's this giant cross that they carry up the hill. The citizenry line up, free will, nobody's forcing them to do it. They line up on the streets, stand in silence as the drum corps accompanies this huge cross up the hill to this old church on the very top of the mountain, and they station the cross there for whatever period of time they leave it. And so we're going, oh my gosh. And Ellie's whole thing said, I want you to understand. I want the world to understand that in Israel we have freedom. Whether you're Muslims, and there was a mosque real close to this Catholic church. There's 15% Muslim in this little town, and the town's like 7,500, something like that. 15% Muslim and 85% Christian, mostly Catholic. There are a couple of old synagogues there that the archaeologists have uncovered. It goes back to 2,000 years before Christ.
Wow.
This little town, and it survived many things, many stuff like that. And so, anyhow, we go, we take the pictures, we do everything that we were supposed to do, and then the host takes us back to his home. Now, as I said, he's a landscape person. His home is lovely. It's like middle class, upper middle class, beautifully furnished. His wife speaks English. She wasn't there when we first got there, but she had made cookies and stuff for us, and I needed another cookie, and so 6, please. And so we had cookies and tea and talked, and I could pick up half of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And my sister was taping all this, recording it with the video camera, but her fingers got in the way, and we're not very good, the kind of like Keystone Cops. But anyhow, we got it. We got most of the audio from it. But the wife came home, which was a real good thing because I wanted to talk to her, and because she does speak English, it was a little easier. And so she said, we talked at length about what it was like to live there. Well, she was born and raised there, as was her husband. Mm. They've been there all their life. They're free, and she made it a point several times to say to me, "We are free." And I said, "What would you like changed?" And she said, "Nothing." She said, "We come and go as we want to." She said, "We have everything we want or need," all this sort of stuff. So, and she was talking about, she goes into Lebanon. There's a group of Catholic women that go by bus into Lebanon like once a quarter for special women's prayer sessions and stuff. And I said, "How is that for you?" She said, "Free. We're free to do whatever we want to do." And so I asked him, I said, "Do you have any intimidation from the Muslims here?" And he said, "No, we outnumber them. No, we're not intimidated by them." He said, "We all get along just fine." And so the kids in school, Aramaic, these Catholic Christians they're not Arabs, they're Aramean. Okay. And the language, there's the theory that the Bible was written, the New Testament was written in Aramaic. And Aramaic, like Hebrew, was the language that's almost died out. Well, now it is being encouraged by the Israeli government, that these Catholic kids learn Aramaic. And so it starts like in the 3rd grade, and they go on all through the rest of the grades. And then when they get to high school, it's optional. They don't have to do it. But almost all the kids there speak Aramaic, as well as Arab, as well as Hebrew. Mm-hmm. One little guy, in fact, our host's niece was darling, and she came and talked to us. She's graduated. She speaks English very well, and she was going to come to America for a year and then go back and do her studies. They do not have to go into the IDF, which is the Israel Defense Forces. It's optional. They can go into it if they want to. They don't have to do national service, but they can do it if they want to, and they are protected. Mm-hmm. If there's any danger towards their village, IDF is right there, protecting them. They're like, as a crow flies, they're no more than 10 miles from the Lebanese border. They're not that far from Syria, they're just probably Safat protects them from rockets as much as anything. But it was amazing to see in this Middle East country where Christians are being killed by the droves, here they're living freely. And they're so thankful.
Wow.
So thankful that they are Israeli. They are Israeli.
Mm-hmm.
They're Israeli Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was great.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the story. I wrote the story for Ailey, and he has been pitching it out to different medias. And I was able to get a few little clips for him that didn't have fingers or something in it. And we sent those to him, and he was able to do something with those. So we'll see. I don't know. His dream was to get it to Fox, because Fox is always doing these little 20-second clips or something. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that or not, but that's his mission right now, is to tell the story. Totally secular Jew.
Wow.
Wanting to tell the story of his country where anybody can worship freely. There's no reason for this hatred. I was amazed.
I wonder if there's not, the prejudice, the idea of that Israel is prejudiced against Arabs
Not true.
is ridiculous.
Not true.
There's more prejudice in the States than there is in Israel.
Yeah.
Israel, they just want to all get along.
Yes.
And you hear the minarets going.
Yeah.
You hear the sound of
Yeah.
having their bar mitzvahs.
Yeah,
You hear the sound of the Christian bells.
You do.
You hear all three of the monotheistic faiths
Yeah.
within Israel.
Yeah.
It's not a scary thing. It's Israel.
Right.
So the prejudice and the stereotypes around the world that are anti-Israeli just drive me nuts.
It is
And I would say that go back to the first episode of this two-part little mini-series that Margy and I are doing together, these interviews, and look at what we talked about briefly, and that is where to go to find good, balanced news on what's going on in Israel. Because it's very hard, it's very difficult to find.
It is. It really is. So anyhow, we just had a delightful trip. We were there for a month, and we did anything and everything we wanted to do. God is very good, and never, ever, ever at any time did we feel any danger, any threat, or anything. We just traveled the highways. I know Israel very, very well. I think that was like my 32nd trip or something. I know Israel very well, and so we just get in the car and go wherever we want to go.
Most people don't get a chance to go to Judea or Samaria.
No. And
they stay in very limited places.
Right. Look, there is no reason not to go. Okay, you think you're going to get killed? Well, where else would you rather die?
But is Israel safe? Is the
It's
question.
safe.
Of course it is.
Sandra Barris and I love getting in the car with her driving and me gawking, and we're going through the hills of Samaria, talking about Scripture, and I'm just loving it.
And you lived in Israel.
I've lived in Israel. Yes, praise God. I've lived in Israel. I met my husband there. He proposed to me on the mountaintop or actually he had already proposed, but the sun's going down when he gives me a diamond ring. And the church bells are ringing. The Christian church bells are ringing as my husband gives me a diamond ring in Israel. Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Birds tweeting.
Well, yeah.
A coach pulled
Cupid
up behind you.
Through, yeah.
They had glass slippers.
Yes.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yes, he did.
I got it.
Yeah, you got it. It's a good story. You
I
should
can see
read
it.
it. It's in my book. I hate it when people say, it's in my book.
There's a big production that's already been done over this several times.
Called Cinderella. I know, it's crazy.
Let's talk about your new series. Now,
Yes.
You've been filming for a couple of days.
Yes.
This is the final day for you.
Yes, it is.
As you're doing a couple promos and some ads and commercials and things, and you're leaving.
I'm going back.
So let's talk about why people will want to watch Serendipity on Israel TV Network.
Well, the reason I chose Serendipity for the name of my show was because my husband always said, don't worry if we get lost, because we traveled a lot. So don't worry if we get lost. We'll find something we didn't know that was there, and it's going to be a serendipity. And so I thought, with my show, you never know what you're going to get. It could be scrambled eggs. It could be anything, That's why I'm in a kitchen setting. So Serendipity just covers everything. So I felt like I wanted to cover the things that people don't talk about, don't think about. And one of those things, my favorite book in the Bible is Genesis. I absolutely love Genesis.
Mine too.
And every time I go back there, I learn something. New.
My second favorite book you'll ever guess.
What? Matthew.
Genesis.
That was going to be Matthew because you
That's
don't put-
weird.
Okay,
No.
so anyhow, I started off again with Jacob's sons. Because as I said on that a while ago, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we know, but do we know the 12 sons? And the 12 sons are the foundation of the tribes. They are the tribes, and this is what starts off. And so I touched on that briefly, and then I
Which
went,
is, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just the idea of 12, that goes all the way through the rest of the Bible.
always.
We have 12 disciples. There's a lot to that.
12.
I would
Love
even
it.
say there's 12 constellations
Yeah.
for a reason. There's
I love it. I absolutely
12
love it.
seasons,
And
12 months.
as much as I love Matthew, and I do love Matthew, but if you just jump in there and you don't know what's going on over here, it's kind of hard to put the puzzle
Yes,
together. It's kind of
yes.
like start reading in the middle of a book.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I wanted to lay the foundation for this because I wanted to talk about the kings of Israel. And we had some really, and when I say Israel, I mean Judah. So you had some really good kings, really great guys. And you said some that, shoo, how did this happen? And they would lead.
What were you smoking?
Yeah. Some of them. And I did a thing on King Ahaz. I don't think King Ahaz, in fact, he was a lousy king, he was a horrible king, but he was Hezekiah's father. And Hezekiah was a phenomenal king. And so I talked about Ahaz because I wanted to lay the groundwork for Hezekiah. And Hezekiah was so good that it went into three sessions on the teaching because there's so much about Hezekiah, and we know about him being sick and the son going back 10 steps, but we don't know the whole story. And so I thought it's time for us to know the whole story. And then I jumped when I finished with the king. I just chose a few, and then I even did a thing on Solomon, which I think will surprise most people. Not that I did it, but what I had to say about it. And then I did this thing I did the thing on Gush Halav, the village, and then I did a thing called Stones and Scrolls. And the reason I did that was because of the Ezekiel stones, which most people don't even know about.
Okay, so pause. Ezekiel stones.
All right. Ezekiel stones are incredible. I just think God is so fun. And he has preserved his word down through the generations because of the Judas. So the Ezekiel stones, Ezekiel, his tomb is in Iraq. And there are these things called tomb raiders, the story of the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Sure.
Well, there are people who are tomb raiders, and they're mostly desert brigands. So anyhow, they were looking for wealth, and they were in Ezekiel's tomb in Iraq. And lo and behold, there's this stone lying on the floor of the tomb. And they looked at it, and there's writing on it. So they figured, well, if there's one, there must be another. So they started ripping all these stones off the walls, and they were on the walls with the stones facing inward. So all you saw was the backside of the stone. And they took them down, and there's 66 stones in the book of Ezekiel. And they're about, 12, 13 inches square, something like that. And most of them are on like white or, a cream-colored marble. But there are several on black basalt. And the ones on black basalt seem to have something to do with the negative chapters, the doom and gloom that's coming. And the others are totally Ezekiel. And the thing is, like the Isaiah scroll, they are perfectly on spot with the book of Ezekiel as we know it. Very little variance.
Between our manuscripts today.
Very little variance. But the thing that is astounding about it is their bas relief means that the lettering is raised. Now, looking at the lettering on these stones, it's continual. There's no spaces, there's no punctuation.
Right.
It's just continual like that. It's bas relief, perfect lettering, about almost half an inch high. Beautifully done. And there's not one mark on these stones from how it was done. There are no chisel marks. There's no scrapings. They can't figure it out. They cannot figure out how this is done. So they've taken 4 of the stones from their house at Yad Ben Zvi, the house of Ben Zvi.
So we have all these.
Yes, we had them all by miracle.
That is a miracle.
God is a miracle.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
That they weren't sold and dispersed all over the world.
Right. A couple of them are cracked, and they've had to put them back together. A couple of them have like an edge missing or something, like a corner. But for all intents and purposes, when you consider how many thousand years old they are, they're
66.
66. Because there are 44 chapters, I think, of Ezekiel. And here they are. And so you can only write so much on square. But I looked at those and I kept thinking, God, of course, they're trying to figure this out. And I'm thinking, well, I know how that happened. I know everything. It's called the finger of God. Da-da-da-da-da-da. God's writing this. This must be how the stones looked like when Moses brought them down from the mountain. And if we can ever find those 10 Commandments, I believe you're going to see the same bas relief on those that you see on Ezekiel stones. So anyhow, I'm talking about these Ezekiel stones to a dear, dear friend. He's like one of my kids, who is one of the best guides in Israel. And he's looking at me and said, Ezekiel stones? And I said, yeah, we're going to go see the Ezekiel stones. And he said, where are they? And I told him, he said, we've never heard of this. I said, you've got to be kidding.
I had never heard of it.
Well, I heard about it about 10 years ago, as many times as I've been to Israel. And my friend had gone, and I tell this in the story about it, but I'll tell it here because it's so delightful. And so she was telling me about these stones, and I'm thinking, okay. And so she said, they're hard to find. You have to know where to go. And she's almost whispering it to me. And I'm listening. In fact, Billy Graham did a teaching on this, but when she did the teaching on it, she said, now turn off the cameras. And I thought, no, I want to hear this, And so I have her teaching manual on it and everything, And I want to hear this, as did David Lewis. David Lewis did a teaching on it, and I think, I need to know.
Okay, well, we need to know.
So shut up and talk.
Tell us.
So anyhow, the story behind it is that the Bedouin grave robbers found these stones. They recognized that they had some value, but they didn't know what, and so they just took them to their encampment. Their chieftain was very ill, and in Lebanon there was somehow they got to Lebanon with them. I don't know how. There was a pharmacist who also practiced as a doctor. And so they went to him and said, if you can make our chieftain well, we'll give you something very valuable. So that happened. The chieftain got well. Miracle number one. So they give him these stones. So they're in his home in Lebanon, 66 stones. His wife is a Christian Arab. All right. The pharmacist dies. Well, in the meantime, in 1940s, early 40s, someone in Israel, a Jew, now Israel wasn't even a nation yet.
Okay, so this is in the 40s.
Yeah, in the 40s. Okay. And so they've had these stones in Lebanon. They've known about the stones now for over 100 years. So at some point in the early 40s, an Israeli archaeologist, heard about them. He tried to get them, tried to buy them, and they wouldn't part with them. They wouldn't sell them to a Jew. Well, then the pharmacist died, and I don't have any idea of the time frame other than in 1945, they got him. And they snuck them in to Israel as we know it today, but it wasn't Israel yet. And so they were held, they just had them. And so when Ben Zvi became the second president of Israel, somehow he got them. And they were in his home, just stacked up in the corner of his home. And somebody came along, realized what they were, and said, well, these need to be protected. And so when he died, they created the Ben Zvi Institute, which is a learning facility. They have seminars and stuff like that going on there. And so this is the story. Teresa and I we rented an apartment. It was located city center, and traffic is bizarre. And so I said, let's just leave the car. I know where this is. So let's just walk there. Well, we walk and I get us lost. It was real cool. But because I got us lost, we found the Ben Zvi Institute because I was off on where I thought it was. And so we get there, and so we go in, and we said we wanted to see the Ezekiel stones. Well, I forgot to look up how you say Ezekiel. In Hebrew, it's Yehezkel. And so all these people are going, Ezekiel, we don't know Ezekiel. I'm thinking, how do you say it in Hebrew? And so finally, and no one knew about it. And this one guy says, I don't know about what you're talking about, but when you find them, come tell me. And I'm like, they're here. I know we're in the right location. So this lady comes in, they said, ask her, she knows everything. And so I said, this is what we'd like to see. I said, can we see them? Well, of course. And so she said, normally we have to have you go around this way and come in from the back. However, we're under construction, so you have to go through this classroom. She took us there. She had to turn on the light. Nobody's going there. It was in this darkened, like little add-on room. It was like an enclosed porch. In a glass case that is like a showcase. Here they are all. And I said, well, can I take a picture? She said, of course. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I thought this was top.
So do you have a picture
I have pictures
that we can show?
when I send them to you.
Okay, so we're going to show you the picture now. Take a look at this.
Okay.
This is amazing.
Yes. So we took pictures of every stone. And then I thought, okay, I want to talk about these on my TV show, but if this is top secret, then I don't want to do something I shouldn't do. So now we have to get permission. So I'm going all through this place trying to find the chieftain to get permission, and nobody knows for sure where he is. And so pretty soon these sirens go off, and I'm thinking, I just wanted to talk to somebody. I didn't touch anything. Well, what it is they're under the fire, like bomb drills. And so they thought a rocket was coming in, so it was a practice alert. And so that's how we found the guy. He comes flying through to go to the bomb shelter. We don't care about the bomb shelter. I just want permission to talk about the stones. He comes through. The lady stops him and does this. And he said, well, what kind of show is it? I said, I teach Bible. And he said, no, it's okay. We can talk about it. I said, I have your permission to talk about these eagle stones? He said, of course. Then he goes off to the shelter and we leave.
Margy Pezdirtz, thank you. I mean, a story that I have never heard of before. Thank you for sharing the picture with us. Mm-hmm. And thank you for being at Israel TV Network. Thank you for being a part of this family.
Thank you for having me. I so love you guys. And this place, Israel TV Network, is really doing amazing things.
Well, because of people like you and because of people like you. Thank you so much for being with us this week. And be sure to watch Margy's new series, Serendipity. You're going to absolutely love it. We'll see you next time. Shalom, shalom.